just want you to take a moment and take a nice deep breath in and exhale. I want you to think about how it feels when you're doing something that's really fulfilling. And it might be fulfilling in that you lose track of time. It might be fulfilling in that you get some positive feelings or sensations in your body. It might be that it just brings you joy, experience happiness as a result. Or perhaps you find yourself wanting to work really hard at it, and the effort that you're making is fulfilling. Just think about the last time you felt that way. And once you discovered that that was a fulfilling activity or task or project or experience, how did you continue to nurture that part of you? So excited today because I have like one of the ultimate guests to have on this program. And I think you will be pleasantly surprised. I know surprise is not the right word, but definitely excited because I have my big brother on Time to Come Alive today. My name is Valerie Hope. I'm your host. And you know that this is an opportunity for me to have a great conversation with somebody who is conscious, who brings us consciousness, brings us connection, and also an opportunity to be creative. So as you're listening to this conversation with my big brother, Eduardo Hope, I hope that you experience all of that. I met Eduardo when I was a little wee baby. and we have a nickname for him, but I don't know, do you want us to divulge? Do you want me to divulge the nickname?
Yeah, it's fine.
It's good? Okay. I call him...
If I were a professional soccer player someplace, I'd probably have that on my back.
We call him Dito in our family. And you will need his express permission to call him so, unless he does become a professional soccer player and he gets it on his jersey. But we call him Dito because from the time I was a baby and I was old enough to talk, his nickname was Eduardito, and of course Eduardito is actually quite lengthy, so we've always just shortened it to Dito. So among the four of us siblings, and then our parents and most of our relatives, that's how and some friends, I guess, yes, as we call him, Dito. So Dito came on.
Panama know me that way, so a lot of people probably don't know my name, my full name.
Oh, really?
They just know me as Dito.
Oh, so Eduardo might be a surprise for some of you listening.
Dito Hope.
Dito Hope. Well, welcome, Dito Hope, to the show. I did want to share one quick memory before we jumped into some questions. When you were very young, and we're about a year and a half apart, so I'm a year and a half younger than you are. I just remember you're such a voracious reader. You would actually read encyclopedias. For those of you who are not familiar with encyclopedias, they're just sets of very beautifully leather-bound books with information about all things known to man at the time. It was our version of the internet in writing. So Eduardo Dito would read these for fun, which I thought was so boring. But you would often be found in a corner someplace, or in your room, or someplace in the yard reading encyclopedias. And so that was one of the first things that I knew about you. And then the other piece is, over the course of my life, you have become my encyclopedia. I often call you my Google. If I have a question about anything, whether it's a fact, or if I want an opinion, or if I want some philosophical stance on something, you're the person that I call. So that's who you are to me. You all-knowing, very curious, voracious reader, and then you're also just a loving brother and son and husband and all that good stuff. What else do you want people to know about you?
What else? I'm a soccer nut, and before anyone asks me who my favorite team is or favorite players, my thing is I just love soccer, and it doesn't really matter what team or what player. And I have my favorites, but really, I'm a fan of good soccer, or fútbol, as it's properly called. Fútbol,
Football, as we're from Panama, so that's in Spanish,
or
football, and in
football if
many other
you're
countries,
British,
football.
but
Yes,
football, or
very
Russian,
nice.
or Dutch. Football, that's the word.
That's it. That's the
It's
word.
football.
What is it about football that's also fascinated you so much? Why?
I don't know. I think it's just using the feet. I don't think it's nothing more exotic than that. Um,
Exotic.
Something about kicking something, and not just kicking it, but also being able to do what you want with the ball. I think that's just a natural human something, something to it, something
Huh.
to that. Um, but just very attractive and just fun. It's just fun. It's just fun. It's a different thing to run after it and get all tired and sweaty about it. And but yeah, just the fun aspect is, you know, ball playing,
The
but
fun
with the feet.
aspect.
It's kind of
Okay.
weird, and that's the attraction.
Okay. Tell us about the first time you remembered knowing that that was an exotic, fun thing to do.
I don't even remember, um, but there's just something about kicking something and making it go where you want it to go. I think that's the first hit, that oh, no, it should have gone straighter, or no, I wanted to go up to the left, and then you just keep trying it, and the next thing you know, you spent 30 years doing that until you get it right. And in the meantime, you meet a lot of people from around the world. I probably learned how to pronounce. I was probably interested in languages through football, through soccer, just trying to pronounce correctly the names of Polish players and Dutch players and Czech, Czechoslovak at the time players, and Brazilian players and Russian players, and even their countries. Way back, the very first World Cup that I paid attention to was 1978 World Cup, and it wasn't even something that we watched at home like on a regular basis. It was just
Mm.
something that I saw passing, in passing, at a friend's house, and I thought, oh, I want to see some more of that. And then it was time to go home, but I remembered those players' names, um, and just never left me.
Do you remember the names now?
Oh yeah, I still remember the name of, particularly one Brazilian player. His name was Jose Dirceu. Jose Dirceu was, um, I don't think he was even that great of a player, but at the time he was the top goal scorer for the Brazilian national team. Um, he was scoring goals left and right during that World Cup. So of course the sportscasters would say his name all the time. Goal, Jose Dirceu. Goal, Jose Dirceu. Well, okay, Jose Dirceu stuck into my. How old was I at that time? I was 6 years old, 7 years old, 7 years old, 6 years old. Not yet seven, because this was summer 1978. So Jose Dirceu, and there are a number of other players there as well, like, Paolo Rossi from Italy, um, Roberto Bettega, um, and those are just random names that I still remember from watching the snippets of games that I was able to watch. Because at home we didn't really have soccer playing on TV or anything on any
Mm-mm.
regular basis, but just from wandering into other friends' homes and watching what their parents or big brothers or whoever was watching, and I just stuck with that. And those names always stayed with me there until later on, many years later, I would find them in a book, as I was trying to teach myself how to play.
Is that why you're reading the encyclopedia so much?
No, I was just reading encyclopedias just for, random knowledge. Well, encyclopedias, what that means.
What?
Encyclopedia is a Greek term that means general knowledge. So there you go.
And this is so par for the course for you, Dito, because all of my life you were the container of random knowledge. Like I literally could come to you and say something like, hey, do you know why the Dutch flag or the Dutch colors, let's say football, talking about football, right? The Dutch color for the team is orange. And then you would say, what?
Because for most of its history, Holland or the Netherlands was known as the Kingdom of Orange. So there you go. It's the national color.
So I literally could come up with any random fact and you would either know right off the top of your head because you just have that kind of memory, or as you can see, those of you who are looking at the video behind Dito is like a library of books, which is that's like a fraction of the books that you've had in your lifetime or that you even have in your home. Bless your heart.
Yeah.
So,
when it's time to move, I'll be giving a lot of these books away, just for the fun of it.
And acquiring some new ones.
Once I get to where I'm moving. Definitely.
Yeah. So I'm really curious about what was it about general knowledge, right? You've talked about the encyclopedia, the Greek term for general knowledge. What was it about general knowledge that was so appealing to you?
I wasn't reading for general knowledge. I was reading for what I was interested in at that moment, which I think is just the way that goes. And then you end up reading all sorts of different things in different moments. But there's always research. Really, it's just research. I like to look up things. So my personal library is really a research library. And I didn't even know to call it a research library or even have a stated intention to have a research library at home. But unconsciously, that's what I've been doing all my life. Building a research library because that's just my orientation. I just like to research things, go to the library all the time or go to a bookstore all the time and go to somebody's home and say, oh, you have this book. What is it about? Can I borrow it or whatever? Or what I usually do is make a mental note of it and then look it up on Amazon or some other website and see if I can get it or read it someplace else, just because I'm curious about that particular topic or subject. So
what are those topics? What did you find yourself researching first? I mean, because encyclopedias were all in alphabetical order. So do you remember the first one you pulled out and what you were looking for?
It could have been anything. I may have just been researching cheetahs. Like, how fast do cheetahs run? Let me, what encyclopedia? CH. Let me look at that and then just go from there. And, oh, next to cheetahs is, I don't know, Cheetos. I don't know. And read what the composition of Cheetos.
I don't think we had Cheetos back then.
I don't know, whatever, it's just, and just next thing you know, just keep reading until it was time to do something else. And that's how.
Did you read them in order?
No, not particularly.
Okay.
Not really.
That would have been a lot.
Yeah, it was never that way. That would have been really random. Like, okay, what's the next thing? No, it was always something I was interested in. I'm very interested in many different things.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. I would research it.
How
really
would you
research is my thing.
You are a researcher. That is true. And because I've had those experiences when you didn't know something off the top of your head and a couple hours later or a day later, you're like, so I found, I looked up and I researched, and you come with like cited resources. Okay. So I'm really curious about how would you describe our childhood or your childhood?
How to describe it?
Yeah.
It was a childhood. Uh, you know, uh, there were fun times. There were not so much fun times, crazy times. Um, it was a, it was my childhood, you know, and my childhood is not your childhood, not anybody else's childhood. And I'm recently present to that because having conversations with friends, and usually people will say, "Oh, do you remember this or do you remember that?" And how was it that? Why was it this way for you? And I don't remember that. And I'm very, very present to how even if you're a twin, you're just not going to experience things the same exact way. So, you know, there's that.
And
So
we have two brothers, younger brothers who are
childhood
twins.
is
Yeah.
childhood is the way it was for each person, even
So
having certain things in common, but childhood is the way it is for each person.
what is that memory of your childhood that you feel is most dear to you?
Um, I would say now, I would say all of it is dear to me. Every single piece, from the earliest memory I have, which is of a Christmas tree. That's my earliest memory.
Our Christmas tree? Whose Christmas tree?
A Christmas tree that we used to have way back when. It was a silver, it was an artificial silver Christmas tree that at night um, um, we would have a lamp with one of those
Yeah, with the
circular,
colors.
yes, I think it was just three colors, but that's the earliest neat, clear memory that I have of
Yeah.
probably just sitting on a, or not sitting, maybe just lying down someplace. Uh, Mama would put me on and just watching it. I don't know how old I was. I may have been 2 or 3 or yeah, that's the earliest memory I have. All the way through, I don't say childhood ended when I became a teenager. So all the way through our um, emigration from Panama and moving to the United States, 1982.
Yeah.
All of it. Good times, bad times, everything. Difficult times, but mostly it was all fun. I just remember laughing a lot, playing a lot, running
Mm-hmm.
around barefoot a lot, um, making up stories, a lot of playing, a lot of laughter. So
Mm.
that was childhood for me.
Laughter being so important to you, what do you consider humorous or funny? What strikes you as funny?
All sorts of things, random things could be
What's the
funny.
last time you laughed out loud about something, and what was it?
Um, Out loud.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Excuse me. Last night, um, my wife Eva and I were looking at some crazy videos from Spain um, um, that people are posting about how they're dealing with the COVID-19 outbreak and their self-imposed isolation at home and how they're not, may or may not be dealing with it um, um, so well, but being funny about it. So, I mean, everything from um, the type of videos that you could post in mixed company to videos that you can't. I mean, there's all types, just
Mm-hmm.
crazy stuff. And Spain, like most Latin countries, not Latin American, but Latin um, um, countries, you know, has a population that's used to being close to a lot of people. And so people are having a really hard time self-separating um, and staying put, staying home, not going to the cafes, not going out and chit chatting with people and hugging and kissing and all that good stuff, which is just part of everyday life for them, and that has had to be cut short. So a lot of people are reacting to that creatively as they have to deal with it. So yesterday, Eva and I were watching these crazy videos that people were posting and just laughing our heads off. This crazy stuff, you know, things between husbands and wives, next door neighbors, the public in general, just how they're seeing it. And this is just the first week. Well, for them, it's probably just 2 weeks at this point. But yeah, it's just started. So yeah, last night, like late at night, 10 p.m., just laughing my head off. Laughed so hard, put me to sleep. That was good.
Like you laughed yourself unconscious.
I was so tired afterwards. Put me to sleep.
Laugher size. I like to call it laugher size. Hey, so shifting gears a little bit. So obviously you and Eva, your wife, Eva has been a part of the show. She's actually been interviewed on the show a couple of times. So shout out to Eva. I know she's out there watching. I'm curious though, what have you learned about yourself? You obviously learn a lot. You have general knowledge. You get all this from the encyclopedias that you used to read when you were young. You have all these books in your research library. When you think about your relationship with Eva and the experiences that you've had ever since you've been together, what are some things that you've learned about yourself?
Some things I've learned about myself. I'm curious, and I like to share what I learn. Those are the two biggest things I've learned.
Say more about that, curiosity.
So curious, where does that come from? I don't know exactly where that comes from. There's definitely an orientation to life. Like there definitely is a way to live in which you just take things as given and you're not particularly curious. You just take things as given. This is the way it is. This is the way it's been. And then there is being curious. Why is it this way? How does it work? Since when? How long is it going to last this way? Is there a different way of doing it? A better way of doing it? And is this going to take me to Mars or to some further planet out there? Is this just for planet Earth? I mean, there's, curiosity almost knows no bounds.
What impact has that had on you and how you've lived, being curious?
Impact probably has something to do with what I ended up doing for a living, which is when I finished university. I went to university straight out of high school. When I finished university, I became a language teacher, language instructor, private language instructor, and translator, interpreter. Did that for 20 years, and now I'm a high school teacher. So it probably has something to do with that. At least the curiosity for transmission piece of it, like sharing what I know and teaching people how to speak another language, how to learn another language. And now in high school, teaching social studies and Spanish. So that's the biggest impact, or the most obvious impact. Yeah, and on a personal basis, well, I have a personal library. If I weren't so curious, all of this space would be taken up by pictures or, I don't know, a bar or
a bar.
That, board games or knickknacks from my travels or something. But instead of those things, I have books, um, because my curiosity hasn't stopped, and has has me accumulating books from all the different types of areas of knowledge, including books for simple entertainment like novels. I have a section just for short stories and novels, poems, as well as uh, quote unquote more practical um, uh, books. But yeah, that's on a personal level. Like my house looks a certain way.
Like your mind, which by the way is on your t-shirt. What does your t-shirt say?
There's no app for this. There is no app for this.
For the brain, yes. So I have one additional question about this acquisition of knowledge and your curiosity, and then I want to pivot to what you shared about being a teacher. There's a story I'd love for you to share about an experience at university. You and I both went to the same university, University of Alabama, Roll Tide, and you were about a year or
Roll
two
Tide.
ahead. Yeah, you're about a year and a half or 2 years ahead of me. And you had an experience in the library one day, remember?
Experience in the library.
Oh, you were in the library all the time, but this one was an extended visit to the library, like over.
Oh, well,
Share that, please.
yeah. It happened all the time. I mean, that was probably the number one thing that I enjoyed the most, and I enjoyed university a lot. But at the University of Alabama, Tuscaloosa, um, I really loved that library. Later, I got to love all the libraries because there are different libraries on that campus. But the main library, Tuscaloosa, was something special. I immediately felt connected to it, just um, just out of a coincidence. It started out as a coincidence when I first went to that campus and entered that university, the Amelia Gail Gorgas Library, the main library of the campus. Um, the name of the librarian for whom the library is named just sounded familiar, and then when I entered the university, I understood and I felt an immediate connection to it. In Panama, where we were from, um, when the canal was built back in the early 1900s, the United States Corps of Engineers was put in charge of that project when the United States took over the canal building project. And the medical officer in charge of making it possible for the canal building project to actually go forward was a general by the name of William Crawford Gorgas. And William Crawford Gorgas was the son of Amelia Gail Gorgas, who was the librarian of the University of Alabama in the late 19th century. So, and then of course there was a Gorgas house close by. But anyway, when I entered that library and I saw the huge portrait, both of Amelia Gail Gorgas and of William Crawford Gorgas, I was like, oh, it's like homecoming for me. It's like, oh, this is where I need to be. I need to spend time in this place.
Only you would think that these two random people would be homecoming.
Yeah, it's like, who are these people? But it was just one of those. Of course, for me, it was a history thing. Like, oh, yeah, there's history, like a historical connection here. Because I'm from Panama. He was in my country, as a medical officer, made the canal possible. Now I moved here. I'm coming to university here. I'm in the library where his mom was the librarian. Okay, it's, I need to check out this place. It was just a perfect excuse. And I spent a lot of time inside that library, like a lot of time. If I wasn't in the classroom or playing soccer out on the quadrangle, um, I was probably inside the library. And it wasn't necessarily studying what I was supposed to be studying at school. It was just being in the library, reading whatever I could find that
Yeah.
just struck my fancy. Um,
I may
in
have gone to
fact,
that library like 3 times.
it was awesome. I was able to catch up on the 1978 World Cup, reading the McLean's um, uh, uh, um, uh, magazine articles
Mm.
about it, because I didn't get to see the whole World Cup, and okay, I sort of forgotten about it, and I go to this library, I find the magazine stacks, and I say, I wonder if they have stuff about the World Cup, and I find it is a Canadian magazine, McLean's, and I just stayed up one night, pretty much reading stacks and stacks of it, and it went for such a long period of time that I didn't notice that the library was closing. And then the library closed. And suddenly the lights went off. I was like, what? Oh no, what? Oh, I'm inside the library. I don't want to trip any alarms. And I stayed in there overnight. And, eventually I fell asleep. But I had actually a flashlight in my backpack and kept on reading. And later on, I found out that graduate students have cubicles inside the library that they can use to do their studying overnight. And I was not a graduate student; I was just a freshman that year. But at that moment, I thought I was in big trouble because I was in the library overnight. No one knew I was in there. Something could have happened. I could, and then later on, I found out, hey, if I were a graduate student, so I made like a graduate student. And, okay, well, that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be in the library all hours, and I'm not going to worry about it. So that's what I did, and it was pretty frequent. It was not a one-time thing that happened. It was frequently.
I just got, I can't stop laughing. But I just have to say how proud I am to have a brother whose biggest, most heinous crime was staying in a library after hours.
Yep, big trouble.
Breaking and entering. See, this is what we should be putting out in the media.
Nah, we're good.
Well, maybe not. Not that you should break and enter a library. I don't mean to condone that, but the idea that you get so caught up in reading that this is how it went. So very cool. I want to pivot a little bit here. So we had an experience there. So in college, we went to the same university. You're obviously, like I said, a year and a half older than me, but you and I didn't really connect that much in our childhood. I don't recall us having these types of conversations, like very meaningful conversations anyway. There are bits and pieces, I think, at least in my memory. And
now, when we were children, we were just telling stories. I think we were more creative. We were more creative. We were making up stories. And when we weren't making up stories, we were arguing about something.
probably.
So that's what it wasn't sharing like, oh, what do you think about? No.
No.
We're just creating making up stuff or fighting about something.
Yeah.
Oh, it's your turn.
You did it. Weren't you the
making up stories about some craziness that happened or didn't happen. That's what we did.
But there was a time, and you and I both did the Landmark Forum. This was about 5 years ago now. 2015. So I did it first, and I will share. And it's a personal development workshop that that has multiple layers, right? There's different courses that one could take, but the initial one is called the Forum. And I bring that one up particularly because I think that was probably one of the most significant shifts in our relationship. It so happened that when I went, it was a 3-day experience, but about halfway through, I had this breakthrough in how I related to expressing love in my own life. In our family, we grew up in a family who we were close in the sense that we were close in distance. We did have conversations and arguments, but we didn't necessarily express how we felt about each other very openly. There was no like PDA. We didn't hug and kiss. Maybe shoved each other on the way to the kitchen and back. You know, it was kind of more a little bit rough housing. I'm the only girl. I have, you know, 3 brothers, so it was probably more like that. But I remember having this experience when I went through that workshop that, you know, I do love my brothers and I love my family, and we don't ever say it to each other. I'm like, why is that? And that looked like me in other areas of my life too. But I remember specifically after that realization, calling you. And I said, hey, Dito, guess what? I learned that, you know, we grew up in a family that didn't really express emotion and affection very openly. And I don't know why. And I love and appreciate you so much and admire so much, but we don't talk that way to each other. And I really committed that was going to stop here. And you and I had a really beautiful conversation about it. And you said the same. And since then, at least in my experience, I feel like how we communicate with each other and what we share with each other has really just exploded, right? How do you see that? How did you see a shift in maybe how I communicated with you or vice versa after that experience?
Well, the shift is definitely communication. And I'll say, in my experience, communication is definitely where that shift happened. Because I think we did express our love for one another in our family, just not verbally.
Yes.
It wasn't a verbal communication. And then as children amongst each other, we didn't really um, 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 express that in any overt way. But definitely after the forum, after you did the forum and the advanced course, you came alive that way.
Yeah.
And came, you know, into expressing that more and demanding that communication from us more. And what I learned when I did the forum, October of 2015, was also, hey, communication matters. Communication makes a difference. Expressing things verbally, not just doing certain things or showing or demonstrating, but also using language. When it's available, use it because it makes a difference. And it's one of the development issues that I still have, like expressing myself, expressing everything from the most important things, big ideas or big commitments, down to, oh, hold up a second, I need to do this, I'll come back in 30 seconds, or I'll come back in a minute. Even something as random and quote unquote insignificant as that is still significant. It's actually significant because it lets the other person know what you're up to, what they can expect from you, and where your relationship is, the status of your relationship, what the commitment is, all kinds of different things. There's definitely nonverbal signaling, but you know, verbally,
yeah,
makes a big difference too. It creates a whole world of possibility for clarifying, for creating, not just describing, but also creating, which is very, very important.
mm-hmm.
This right now is a creation. We're creating something right now. I'm totally clear about that. And that's definitely worth exploring and discovering for oneself, and um, um, yeah, and sharing it with other people.
Mm-hmm. I think you've always been so, and I admire this now. You know, now we're both in our 40s. I don't know if I was this keen on it when I was I was a teenager or whatever, but I really admire how you have cultivated, you've cultivated a really beautiful inner landscape. You know, the research that you did, all the reading, the amount of time that you spent in silence and many times. And I remember you inspired me to go to that 10-day Vipassana meditation course. It took, I think, the second time you went and you came back, and I don't think I'd ever heard you talk about your inner landscape, as much as when you shared what it was like being there for 10 days of silent meditation. And you're painting a picture of what was going on in your mind was very inspirational to me, because I'm like, wow, I don't think I've cultivated my inner landscape to this extent. And that's when I ended up going myself, and going twice, as a matter of fact, like you and Eva have. I want to ask you about this. You mentioned not only acquiring knowledge is important to you, and obviously you've cultivated a lot of this over your lifetime, but now you're in a place where you're sharing. You said you're really compelled now to also share this. So talk to us about how you discovered what you wanted to share and how you wanted to go about sharing it, and to whom.
I don't know that I'm compelled to share. Like I said, communication is still one of my development issues. And who I ended up being as a person is someone who doesn't share. Kind of, my natural state is to withhold. And not because I don't want you to know something, but rather because I don't want to be expressive, or I'm good with where I am and where you're at, and okay, well, all right, see you later. I'm good to go, like that. Um, Unless something else stimulates me, and I want to be out there, be with people, and we're sharing and collaborating and doing what we do for that particular period of time, for that particular activity. Um, that moment in time is share, whatever that is. And then, okay, see you later. I'm going to my fortress of solitude. I got my books. I'm good. See you guys later. Um, and I'm still that person. That's probably never going to go away. Um, but what's happened is I have a new commitment to um, being with people, and being with people is sharing. I mean, that's basically what it is sharing. And not just sharing like me vomiting out everything I have in my head about this and that and the other, but also listening to what other people have going on, and what they're dealing with, and what they think about this or that. And I thought that I was a good listener, but it wasn't intentional. I would say it was just the way also I ended up being. Like, I'm a curious person. I can listen to you all day. Tell me more. But I'm not sharing what I got like that. Unless the conversation was stimulating enough that, yeah, I'll, tell you what I think about this or that. But it was more of a reaction. It wasn't a commitment to anything. It wasn't. It wasn't. Um, yeah, it wasn't sharing. It was. I just happened to, say what I had to say to this person because, you know, that person pushed that button and that came out. Now it's intentional. Now I can be with people, and I'm training myself to be with people. Now I can listen to people, and I'm training myself to listen to people, and I'm definitely training myself on expressing what I have to say, and what I want, what I need, and what I think, judiciously, of course, not vomiting out what I'm thinking at every moment, but definitely being in communication about who I am and what I'm up to. So, out of that new commitment, I created being a high school teacher. What does that mean? That means that I was inspired to become a high school teacher, and I declared I'm going to be a high school teacher. And I went and did the certifications and whatnot to do it. And now I'm a high school teacher, and I'm learning how to be a high school teacher because there are things to learn how to do. The administrative part is the easy part. I think is the easiest part. Most boring part, but it's the easiest part. The interesting part is being with teenagers. That is the interesting part. And it's interesting because there is something to break through there in order to be with them. And
What do you mean breakthrough?
something to break through.
For you or for them or who?
Both. It's both ways.
Hmm.
It's both ways because one has to get out of their own way. I have to get out of my own way as an adult. With teenagers, don't follow instructions. And now there's something for me to break through.
Can you give an example
Of me
what you've
breaking
had?
through?
Yeah, of what you've noticed you needed to break through to get out of your own way.
So if a student doesn't follow my instructions, doesn't do what I ask him to do, and I've communicated with that student, I'm face to face with what is my commitment in this moment in time with this student in front of me? What's my commitment? Is my commitment to transmitting this information that they need to get in order for them to pass this class, or is my commitment to being with this student? Being with this human being. That's my commitment. Any other way, I would not be a high school teacher, because before this new commitment to being a high school teacher, before I did the Landmark Forum, before I got clear about who I was and not being and all of that, I had way too many complaints and concerns about public education, administrators, teachers, teenagers that I was dragging from way back when I was still a high school student myself. Because I would see other students around me and like, these doofuses are not going to learn anything. Why am I with them in the same class? Shouldn't I be somewhere else? And let me just
This
go to
is
the
you
library
as a
and keep learning.
student.
This was me as a student back way back when, 30 plus years ago. So now back in the classroom, but this time as the teacher, I have to complete that part of my life, of my past. Oh, yeah, same sensations and same idea about what they shouldn't be doing, blah, 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 blah. And none of that makes a difference if my commitment is to be with them. My commitment is to be with each individual student, or even as students as a group. I have to let go of all that stuff because it doesn't serve the purpose of being with them. What there is to break through then is my opinions about how it should go. I have to let all that stuff go and just be present to who they are as human beings. And when I get present to who they are as human beings, then whatever it is that they are doing or not doing is just them reacting.
Can you share with us an instant or a moment where we could get what you mean by that? What did you notice? What was the interaction?
What are you talking about? The last thing that I said about them reacting?
Yeah. So yeah, what's something that you've done or said or you've discovered that, okay, I'm now committed to being with this person. What does it look like? Like, tell us about a time where you've done
in that
it.
situation where I tell a student, okay, open your textbook to page 56. And they don't do anything. Or the more likely scenario is they have their head buried in their smartphone with headphones on, either listening to music or watching something on Netflix, instead of paying attention to the instructions and doing what I asked them to do to continue with the lesson. So what are they doing? What is this kid dealing with? He's dealing with boredom, not wanting to be at the school. This is who I am being with them. This kid is dealing with boredom, not wanting to be at school, not wanting to be in the classroom, being pulled into something that's a little bit more entertaining than a lesson on how to conjugate verbs in Spanish by watching Netflix or listening to whatever rap music they're listening to or whatever. So they're dealing with all of those things. So okay, so that's what there is. I can break through that by being present to that and then walking up to that student and planting myself in front of him or her, and they'll see me walking up. I've already established a relationship with them, but that's just their habit. That's just their habitual way of being, doing those things, being distracted, whatever. And I'll point to, hey, you mind taking that? Take those off. Okay. Can you do that after class, during lunch, after school? We're talking about grammar now, verbs. Okay.
You use the same tone.
And I might. It just depends on the student too. That's the other thing, right? Some students say, hey, talking to you, and they'll react. Another student, if I do that to that, they won't react too well. But that particular student might react very well to, hey, wake up, buddy. But another student, I can just say, and be very low key about it, and they'll get it because I'm already in tune with what's going on with that particular student. With the other one, I need something more, So it just depends. And as I've seen myself catch on to what each student needs to engage in the classroom, I get confirmation. Being with them is like being with them, like being with them. And then they wake up, they come back online, so to speak, right? They're locked onto the classroom again, and then keep doing that through the period of time of the class, because the connection will drop off. It's not the greatest connection, like internet that we have. No, teenage attention spans are not a perfect lock. They'll drop off. They have friends that'll text them and send them Snapchat craziness, and their attention will go there. But if I know each one of them, because I know how to be with each one of them, I establish that relationship with them in the early days of the school year. I catch on to what each of them needs. I can make a difference with each one of them in their own time, which is another challenge, something else to break through, because the expectation is, as a professional, that you do what you got to do, and then these students need to respond right away, and it's going to show up in their exam results at the end of each semester, and sometimes it's not the greatest result. But that's, I'm still learning how to be a teacher, and the relationships are not perfect. And I tell the students too at the end of each semester. I've been telling the students, next semester is going to be better. I'm going to be a better teacher next semester.
You say this to them?
You need to be here for that. Yeah, I tell them, I'm going to be a better teacher next semester. You need to be here for that. So anyway.
So what is it that next semester you'd like to be better at?
Everything.
If you had to pick one what's the top on the list right now? What's the top one?
Being with them.
Just continue to be with them.
That's the number one thing. If it's not that, I'm not a high school teacher. Nothing else matters. I don't even have a commitment to, I would even say that my commitment to education is inside of my commitment to them as human beings. Without my commitment to them as human beings, there is no commitment to education.
Say more about that.
My commitment to education is inside of them being human beings. I have something that they need to learn, or I'm a space for them to discuss, get off their chest, whatever it is that they need to discuss or get off their chest, express, whatever. And that happens in communication, human being to human being. And then everything else happens because that connection is established. So there's education, and education is this phenomenon of transmitting to people, young or old, doesn't matter, transmitting to people something that the culture has decided that they need to know in order for them to function in that culture. That's part one of it. And then part two is the culture would like for them to discover what it is that they have to contribute to the culture. So there's the two parts of education. My commitment to education, that they learn what they need to learn to be successful, and that they discover what they could discover about themselves that would make a difference for them and their families and their community, for culture, is inside of them being human beings. I want them to be successful and to discover who they are because I'm interested in them as human beings. If I were not interested in them as human beings, I would not be a teacher. I could not be a teacher. I would not be an effective teacher. I could not make a difference with them. And I would say most of the time, a lot of the issues people have with schooling and education in general is because that commitment to human beings is missing.
I would dare say that's probably true for any relationship where we're wanting to make a difference, right? So that could be parent-child, it could be friendship, it could be spouse. But so what I'm hearing you really say is that first and foremost is wanting to be in relationship and connection with somebody as a human being, human to human. And once that connection is established, and then their role and your role, their expectations, your expectations can then be met inside of that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, otherwise it just doesn't make any difference. It's just a waste of time. And yeah, that's basically it.
Okay.
And the interesting thing about studying something like humanities, or even the types of things that a student has to learn at school and tested on, and even in university, the first year or two of university, those things that are called the core curriculum, um, those subject areas, language arts, science, mathematics, social studies, traditionally, in our culture, they're known as the humanities. Even math and science, because they come from curiosity and concern of human beings for, measuring and for discovering how the world works. And then, of course, there's language arts and social studies, which is really all about, how we communicate and communicating our imagination, and also, chronicling what's been going on since we got organized as communities and as societies. So all of that is the humanities. And around the time that people actually conceptualized this idea of the humanities is when the idea of education became formalized. Like, this would be a great idea to actually package this notion of the humanities and transmit it to the next generations. There's no reason why people need to reinvent this wheel. Let's package this thing and transmit it to the next generations by organizing these ways for, selected number of young people to go to a tutor or instructor and learn these things. Um, and that's the beginning of schooling. So um, the ironic thing is, um, um, it's definitely the orientation of schooling, of education, sorry, of education through schooling is a concern for human beings and the experience of human beings in the world as they create culture and cultivate it and everything. But none of it matters if teacher doesn't establish human contact with student.
Mm.
It all goes away. It doesn't, there's no transmission and there's no discovery. So
Yeah.
there it is.
Well, I'm excited for whatever your students get to try out next semester. I know in light of all the stuff that's happening, how are you connecting with your students now? I mean, you are on an extended spring break due to this
Yep.
whole Corona COVID thing, but what does it look like during this time when you're having to recalibrate how you're connecting with them? If there's any connection at all, I don't know what that's like
Right
right
now,
now.
there's no connection. We don't have any virtual classrooms yet. That starts next week
Oh,
for those of us in the school district, and then we'll see which students actually log on to the virtual classrooms.
hmm.
That's that's a different story, but we'll see. And the ones who log on will continue learning what they learn, and the ones who don't, next school year they'll have to pick up where they left off,
Okay,
and that's that.
that is
And in the
that.
meantime, um, um, well, I'm sitting home, or rather lying back here at home, um, reading.
Yeah.
So next year, next school year, I might be teaching something about epidemiology to my
Oh,
students. I don't know in what context I'm gonna transmit that, whether it's through world geography. There's a little piece
mm,
about health issues and whatnot. I might do it there. But if I'm teaching Spanish, I'll have to do a lesson plan on epidemiology,
okay.
epidemiología, which actually came into the English language through Spanish. So there we go.
There we go. We were the Spanish language infected the English language.
That's right.
Awesome. Final question. One of the things you mentioned that you are still working on or focusing on is really communicating, and your default is to sometimes withhold, right? You said.
Yep.
I'm
Keep
I'm
to
curious.
myself.
Yeah. So I'm curious about, in our conversation today, what are some things that you may have not said that you want to?
Actually, I think I did a pretty good job of not withholding anything that I needed to say. Thought that would be good to share. Um, I would say it's because I've been warmed up today. This is my 5th Zoom call. I've been,
You've been zooming all over.
warming up my brain and my mouth all morning, and so I'm in sharing mode. So I think in this conversation, we haven't talked about everything, but you can't talk about everything anyway. What comes up comes up, and what doesn't come up doesn't, and that's fine. And everything's being shared that I think could be shared and can make a difference to this conversation.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad that you didn't. I'm really proud of you because I do feel that you shared everything that I asked for you to share, and then some. You know, there were moments where you definitely shared a lot more than I would have probably even thought to ask. So that was not my last question. So that make this one the next to last question is, so what did you get out of this conversation today? What was this like for you?
Um, what was this like for me?
Mm-hmm.
It was fun. It was fun, and I got to interact with you doing your thing, and I can see how you enjoy doing this, and you know hearing what people have to share about what they're up to in life, how they're doing it, what they're learning while they're doing it. And that's all inside of your commitment to them as human beings.
Yeah.
Right? As
It
a
so is.
coach,
Yeah.
or performance coach, or business coach, and all of that. So I'm proud of you that you're making that available to other people, and that you're enjoying it. You're having fun with it. It's definitely an expression of who you are. For me, I see you in action. That's definitely Valerie. That's what she doing. That's what she does. That's how she do.
Yeah.
That's fun to watch, and I really appreciate it. And thank you for letting me play in your sandbox today.
Hey, that wouldn't have happened when we were kids, but I'm really glad that you played in the sandbox today too.
Would have kicked the sand.
I would have like sicked the dog. No, Dito, this was so awesome. I got to tell you, and I shared this before we went online, that I got so excited that we were going to have this conversation. I hadn't really planned on having my family, sibling, etc., being a part of this program, but in our conversation most recently, I really started to get that, man, it would be cool to add some element around education, and your commitment has always been so thoroughly strong and clear, not only for what you shared about what you're doing with your students, but for yourself. The fact that ever since I've known you, as long as I've known you, you have been absolutely a custodian of knowledge in our family and in our communities, and the knowledge that you've acquired to serve other people. And I wanted to show that off, because I am incredibly proud of you and who you are and what you have to offer. And man, those kids could not be luckier. And we could not be luckier for who we have in our lives, and as a result of who you've become for us.
Thank you.
Yay, love you.
I love you too.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for joining us for Time to Come Alive today. I know it's a little bit off schedule, as many things are during this time of social distancing and self-reflection. So to know that there's more to come, other episodes to come. Stay tuned. Dito, Eduardo Hope Jr., thank you so much for sharing your time with us today.
Hasta luego.
Hasta luego, everybody. Thank you.